CBS News special.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It's so good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we are watching right now. President Biden in Detroit this afternoon trying to calm economic jitters after reports on consumer prices. Well, they tanked the stock market yesterday. More on what his pitch is. Our Nancy Cordes sat down with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to ask about a possible increase in fuel prices, the latest inflation numbers, and when we might expect the recent interest rate hikes to level off. Another primary victory for a Trump-associated Senate candidate, despite his efforts by his own party to sink retired General Don Bolduc in New Hampshire. More on Bolduc and other Trump-aligned candidates and their chances in the upcoming midterms. And later this hour, a rematch of Georgia's 2018 race for governor. That's underway. But a lot has changed since Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp's last head-to-head matchup. Plus, he has been, no doubt about it, one of the most effective fundraisers in modern political history. But getting former President Trump to actually spend some of that raised money, it's been an entirely different ballgame. Is potential control of the Senate enough to force his hand? But we kick things off with the economy and the aftershocks of a flat inflation report. Now, despite that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats will not only hold the House in the midterms, but will actually gain seats. For more on that bold prediction, CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. So, Scott, you and I always ask politicians who are customarily cagey to make predictions. They almost always avoid the temptation, not the speaker. Talk to us.
They're trying to be bullish to try to provide some optimism for the rank and file Democrats, I believe. We spent this day at the Capitol with so many questions about the economy, coming off of yesterday's series of economic news, inflation concerns, stock market concerns. What we heard Speaker Pelosi say during her news conference today is what happened in the past, talking about the Inflation Reduction Act passage, the ceremony yesterday at the White House, the passage of that multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar infrastructure plan, which could not only create jobs, but save people money by making transportation easier, but also the CHIPS Act, which is going to create jobs and help reduce inflation or reduce supply chain disruptions with semiconductors, electronics, and so many U.S. manufactured goods. But that's a history lesson, Major. That's talking about what's been done, the votes taken, what House Democrats view as their successes this Congress. It doesn't change the reality of the next 2 months, where there's clearly economic anxiety, more warning signs, more red flags, talks of possible recession, inflation continuing to permeate the economy and people's pocketbooks. This is a challenge House Democrats are going to have, the transcendent challenge over the next 2 months.
And the speaker, if I heard her remarks correctly, Scott, was talking about abortion as something that is an accelerant for not only Democratic turnout, but is linked to her prediction that Democrats will not just hold the House, but gain seats. And I want to play a little bit of her response to a proposal from South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham to make abortion illegal on the federal level. Then we'll talk to you on the other side.
I think what you're seeing there is a conflict within the Republican Party. There are those in the party that think life begins at the candlelight dinner the night before. And these people are in defiance of that, right? They're in defiance of that, because they're saying whatever they're saying about it. So that's what you're seeing there. But we are united in our support for women's right to choose.
Scott, quickly catch the audience up. What's Graham's proposal and how has it been received by fellow Republicans?
No surprise, we want to see Democrats wanting to shift this conversation from inflation to abortion rights. Senator Graham of South Carolina has proposed a nationwide ban on abortions after 15 weeks. Making that the law of the land in all 50 states, no matter what those state laws, state regulations are. It's a wedge issue inside the Republican Party in the first 24 hours after it was proposed. And Democrats realize that. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, when asked about it, says he has a view that his conference wants this left to the states and that leadership in the Senate Republican conference won't be mobilizing or mechanizing this issue, which indicates there's no unanimity in the Senate Republican conference about this proposal. There is unanimity in the Democratic caucus in the U.S. House that if they're talking about abortion rights, if they're campaigning on abortion rights, they are more likely to bridge the gap that they face in an historically down midterm election cycle. Senate Democrats, almost to a person, also
Yes, we have a bit of an audio breakup, as you can plainly see with Scott MacFarlane. We will try to reestablish that if we can, because I have a couple more questions for Scott MacFarlane. But as we've reported, a disappointing government inflation report led to the worst day for stocks since June of 2020, that on Tuesday. Gas prices, as you know, have gone down, but elsewhere, prices are at all-time highs. CBS News polling shows the economy and inflation remain the top issues for voters in the midterms. 43% of voters told us they expect the economy will be in a recession next year. For the White House response to all this, CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins me now. Nancy, you spoke with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen earlier about rising costs. Here is some of that exchange.
We got new inflation numbers yesterday. The price of just about everything went up again last month. Were you surprised by those numbers? What's going on?
Well, you know, overall, prices were almost flat last month in August. And that's important. That's 2 months in a row in which overall prices haven't increased. And gas prices have continued to fall. They're down in total this summer about $1.30. So that's a positive. But clearly, there were price increases in other parts of the index. Inflation remains a problem. It obviously is of tremendous concern to Americans, and it's President Biden's top priority to do what we can to get it down. The prime job here rests with the Federal Reserve. We want them to independently use their best judgment on this, and we're trying to take actions that complement theirs.
So, Nancy, the big question hangs in the air. Did the Treasury Secretary give you any indication about when Americans can expect the thing they most want to expect, prices to drop?
She was very careful, Major, not to predict when prices will drop or when inflation will slow. She said that she's hoping for progress over the course of the year, but that she didn't want to get into the position of predicting month by month whether things will improve or not. The reason for that is, well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, she made a big prediction once before. She said that inflation was likely to be transitory. That turned out not to be true. And also, frankly, economists are a little bit stumped at this point about why the prices of most goods and services haven't leveled out the same way, even as gas prices start to go down. And so it's probably unclear to her and unclear to most people who are looking at the numbers exactly when we will see a reversal of this trend.
And as the Treasury Secretary said, Nancy, overall, the situation didn't look as dire. But in key indicators, prices remained high, inflation remained persistent, which scared the markets, which anticipate more Federal Reserve rate increases to try to beat back inflation. And all this happened on the day the president was trying to bathe himself in a little bit of legislative glory on the South Lawn, celebrating the, get ready, Inflation Reduction Act signing and celebration. How is the White House trying to frame those kind of unfortunate optics and the larger push against inflation?
Well, they have adopted the same line that you heard from Secretary Yellen there, which is to say overall prices essentially remained flat. But that is true overall. Yes. Overall. But when you dig into the numbers, what you see is that gas prices came down a lot, but that was offset by prices of just about everything: food, housing, medical care, insurance, all of the daily goods and services that Americans pay for going up. And the reason that's a surprise is because typically when you see gas prices going down for 2 months in a row, as we have, that brings the price of everything else down because it gets cheaper to ship goods and therefore those goods become cheaper. And that is what many forecasters were expecting, and that didn't happen. So the best that the administration can say right now is that overall costs were flat, but that's certainly not what they were hoping to tout yesterday.
And Nancy, as you well know, the White House has been on a bit of a legislative victory run. Passage of new climate and health, tax law, all with the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, but his approval on the economy still remains low. Is that a big fear for Democrats, even as they look and sort of try to burnish the benefits of these legislative achievements?
Sure, because as you know, many voters base their feelings about the current administration not on how the economy might be in the future, but how it is right now. And right now, Americans, according to Moody's, are paying $460 more a month for the same basket of goods and services that they paid at this time last year. That's a big chunk out of their paycheck, and frankly, wages aren't keeping pace with the rise in inflation. And so the pain that Americans are feeling when they go to the grocery store is offsetting their happiness with the strength of the labor market, for example. And so, yes, the Inflation Reduction Act will do some important things that will bring down prices pretty significantly for certain Americans. It's going to cap prescription drug prices for seniors at $2,000. It is going to enable Medicare to negotiate for prescription drugs. It's going to create a lot of incentives for clean energy. But most of those provisions don't kick in now. They certainly don't kick in time for the November elections. They don't kick in until, in some cases, next year, in some cases, 2026. So, the White House is trying to highlight some of these changes that it thinks that people will like. But the bottom line is people aren't going to be feeling it in their bank accounts anytime soon.
Nancy, not to oversimplify, I don't think the president would object to this, but he describes himself as a train guy and as a union guy. So as a train guy and a union guy, he shouldn't have a big rail strike on his watch, should he? What's the latest on that?
He also talks about himself as a deal maker and a negotiator, and he likes to be in the middle of talks like these, as you know, Major. But also, this is a pretty sticky situation. It's unclear how it's going to end up. And I think that there is some reluctance at the White House to place the president in the middle of talks where the outcome is still very uncertain and where the result, if there is, in fact, a freight rail strike, could be so damaging to the economy so quickly. Even if we're seeing just a 1 or 2 or 3 day strike, the impact that could have on everything from groceries, not only their cost, but their availability, to gas prices and everything else, could be fairly eye-popping. And that's why you see the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of Transportation, all huddling with these rail unions today to try to broker some kind of agreement. But at this point, and we're now less than 2 days away from a possible strike, we have not gotten word of any breakthroughs.
From the North Lawn with us tonight, Nancy Cordes. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Scott McFarland rejoins us now, and you can bet we had a stern conversation with those audio gremlins. Scott, you spoke with new congressman who won the 19th Congressional District in New York, Pat Ryan. What did he say, having just won, about the upcoming midterms and the environment?
Ed just sworn in as the newest member of Congress representing New York's 19th district. His special election was just to serve a 3-month term, 4-month term in Congress. Small stakes, literally, but metaphorically, it was a huge election, the first head-to-head close contest for a congressional seat after the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. We asked Pat Ryan if he was going to continue campaigning on that issue. He said yes, but also that another issue should be prominent in his race and every competitive congressional race in November. Take a listen.
You're running for Congress in a midterm election in a district like the one you just won, a really purple bellwether district. Is it worthwhile, is it strategic to talk about Trump or Mar-a-Lago or January 6th? Or is it something maybe you avoid to win that type of district?
I risked my life as an Army officer for this country, for our democracy. And when I see that under threat, when their insurrectionists literally storming our capital, the country and the system of government that I love and risk my life for, you have to stand up. I have to stand up, and we can't pull our punches anymore. There is an existential threat to our democracy.
Pat Ryan won a seat that the Republican was favored to win in every poll before the special election August 23rd. Put it this way, Major, there are many Democrats watching him and following his lead.
So, Scott, let's move on to that issue that you just discussed and that the brand new Congressman Pat Ryan raised, the DOJ's January 6th investigation, one component part of all the things around January 6th. What is the latest on the case against the Oath Keepers?
Goes to trial September 27th. They were in court late in the day on Wednesday with a pretrial hearing talking about jury selection. Let me tell you, this is going to be a spectacle. The top-line defendant, Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, tried at the last minute to fire his defense lawyers and get the trial postponed. His defense lawyers will stay. The judge overruled that request, which means the top-line defendant is going to trial on seditious conspiracy charges, accused of plotting an attack against the federal government with lawyers he trashed openly in court. This is going to be perhaps a month-long trial, Major, the epicenter of all January 6 cases.
And lastly, even after the FBI searched his private residence, there is still some manner of uncertainty, putting it mildly, about whether or not additional unauthorized materials may have been or still be in former President Trump's possession. Big question. Why?
The House Oversight Committee has asked the National Archives to, for lack of a better phrase, check again. Make sure they have everything, because there's a lack of clarity as to whether everything's been found or returned. It's been more than a month since that search at Mar-a-Lago, more than 18 months since Trump left office. That is quite an open question, and the House Oversight Committee is now leaning publicly on the archives. The archives wouldn't comment when we asked them to respond to that letter, but that's more pressure being exerted on the former president, not just by the Department of Justice, now by Congress, as this potentially long legal dispute in the Southern District of Florida plays on.
Audio gremlins summarily dispatched. Scott McFarland, we thank you. Results are in from the last primary contest before the midterms. Among those two key races in New Hampshire, 25-year-old Caroline Leavitt won the GOP nomination in New Hampshire's 1st congressional district. Leavitt was an assistant in the White House press office under former President Trump, and if elected, Leavitt would be the youngest woman ever to serve in Congress. And former Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc won the Republican nomination for the Senate race in the Granite State. He was not endorsed by Trump, but has spread false claims about the 2020 election. The GOP nominee Bolduc will face off against incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan, of course, in November. For more on this, Bob Costa joins us now. Robert Costa is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. So, Bob, the dust has settled in New Hampshire. What is the early read?
Major, good to be with you. The Trump movement continues across the country to gain traction, and it's not so much a policy debate inside the Republican Party. It's often a clash of attitude, of posture, of people who accept the results of the 2020 election versus those who have fought against them and denied that Joe Biden's a legitimate president or was legitimately elected. These are the new fault lines that are now exposing themselves in these various Republican primaries, including in New Hampshire on Tuesday night.
So new CBS News polling shows Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor Democrat John Fetterman pulling ahead of Mehmet Oz in the Senate race. You've been in this race. You're in Pennsylvania now. Where do you see the momentum?
The CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows that the race is fluid and tight. Fetterman's up by about 5 points on Dr. Mehmet Oz, the Republican, the celebrity doctor and Trump ally. It's clear that this race is fluid for a few reasons. Number one, Fetterman's health after a stroke a few months ago has become front and center in this campaign. You saw just earlier today, Fetterman decided he would do a debate with Oz in late October. The two campaigns are still negotiating the details of that October 25th scheduled debate at this time. But you see in Fetterman someone who has a progressive history as a mayor and lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania, a working class appeal. Democrats felt very good about his candidacy earlier this year. He beat an establishment favorite in Congressman Connor Lamb. But now the Fetterman campaign's more uncertain based on the health questions. Fetterman says he is recovering but fine and ready to serve. And he's also called Oz's remarks about his health out of bounds.
There's also an important governor's race in Pennsylvania, and our polling at CBS shows Democratic State Attorney General Josh Shapiro up 11 points over Trump-backed Republican nominee Doug Mastriano. Again, same question. You're there. What's the feel?
Doug Mastriano is another Trump ally. He was near the Capitol on January 6, 2021, trying to object to Biden's certification in Congress. He is someone who is a hardline conservative, an election denier, has repeated former President Trump's false claims about 2020. He's also press shy, not of conservative media, but he has not engaged in any real way with traditional news outlets throughout Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the Democratic Attorney General in Pennsylvania, now has an 11-point lead, according to the latest CBS poll. We spoke to Shapiro earlier today here in Philadelphia, and it's clear Shapiro believes because of the way Mastriano has framed his candidacy, he can make an overture to suburban Republicans in places like Bucks County and Montgomery County and Delaware County, those so-called collar counties around Philadelphia that are so crucial because they are vote-rich.
Robert Costa coming to us from Pennsylvania in the campaign trail. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Major.
Changing demographics, a massive voter registration effort, and a very public feud with former President Trump. That is just a sampling of what has changed since Stacey Abrams and Republican Governor Brian Kemp faced off 4 years ago. New polling on that and the state of play in Georgia's other big race. You are streaming Red and Blue.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange?
Yes.
You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
We are so excited, we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Mayor Savino. Miss Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know.
It's all right.
One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
CBS Mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
Just a little sunshine. Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
A new poll in Georgia shows Democratic gubernatorial nominee Stacey Abrams neck and neck with incumbent Governor Brian Kemp. The Quinnipiac University poll has Abrams just 2 points behind Governor Kemp. Now, you might recall that Abrams narrowly lost to Kemp in 2018 in that same gubernatorial race. She's never conceded that defeat. Afterwards, she was noticed statewide for boosting voter turnout in the 2020 election in Georgia. For all things Georgia, I want to bring in Tia Mitchell. She's the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Now, we'll get to the Quinnipiac poll and other polls in Georgia on the governor's race in a second, but big picture, remind the audience, Tia, if you'd be so kind, what has changed politically since the last time Abrams and Kemp faced off?
What has changed politically is that neither one of them now is a newcomer. Kemp now has, 3 years of incumbency under his belt. He can run on a record. He can run on what he did during the coronavirus pandemic. He can run on what he has passed with the help of Georgia's Republican-led legislature. Stacey Abrams hasn't been in office, but she also is a known figure. You mentioned that she worked on voting rights. She worked on election reform. She has still continued to build kind of an apparatus around her and quite frankly became a celebrity in her own right, particularly within Democratic circles. And I think that benefits them in certain ways, but also in certain ways, it's hard to kind of create the same messaging, particularly for Stacey Abrams, because she's no longer that kind of, underdog upstart. She's, just as much of a known commodity as Kemp now.
And Tia, on this Quinnipiac poll, it looks to me, I don't want to use outlier because that may be too pejorative, but I've seen lots of other polling data, and I've talked to people down in Georgia who don't see the race or it doesn't feel to them as close as this one survey. What's your take?
Yeah, I will say that the Quinnipiac poll, which is the latest poll, is more favorable to Stacey Abrams than some of the other polling we've seen, including polling conducted by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So there will be other polls coming out soon, including from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So we'll see if the Quinnipiac polling continues to be an outlier or if more polling shows that Stacey Abrams has kind of evened things up, so to speak, with Governor Kemp. That being said, all the polling does still show a close race. It does show Kemp with a bit more of a lead than what this latest poll shows, but it does show a close race, and that's what we expect in Georgia.
And as you mentioned, Tia, after her loss, Abrams vowed to mobilize and continue to mobilize voters throughout Georgia. Republicans noticed that. As I understand, Republicans have mobilized as well. How does the overall turnout modeling look? I know it's going to be a midterm, but does it look like something that will be robust also in this race?
Yeah, we think it'll be robust. Of course, it's not just the governor's race on the ballot. We have a hotly contested Senate race, as you know. And then down the ballot, there are a lot of other statewide offices. So we do expect this to be a robust voting period. The one risk that could negate that is, of course, what's going on in the world, the economy. And also there is a little bit of voter fatigue in Georgia. Georgia, because of its runoff system, does require a lot of voting. And then, of course, Georgia hasn't just had, the 2020 presidential election, but depending on where you live, there may have been local elections and special elections. So it seems that there's kind of this perpetual state of campaigning in elections in Georgia, even more so than some states because of that runoff system.
Tia, you mentioned the Senate race. Incumbent Raphael Warnock has been, it can only be fairly described as something kind of a fundraising juggernaut, huge fundraiser. And how does that stack up against the Republican nominee, Herschel Walker? And where would you say that race is?
So, yeah, Raphael Warnock is the #1 fundraiser out of federal candidates this cycle. In his campaign account alone, he has $84 million. Now, compared to Herschel Walker has closer to $21 million. That's in their direct campaign accounts. However, there's going to be a lot of outside spending from, political groups aligned with the political parties. And so it won't look as imbalanced as perhaps the numbers show. But yes, Raphael Warnock is a very formidable fundraiser. This is one of the handful of toss-up Senate races. And because the Senate is currently evenly divided, both parties really want to win Georgia in their hopes of retaking control in the Senate and all that comes with that. So this is, in some ways, even more so than the governor's race, the race that everyone is watching, the race that has perhaps the most potential impact. And this is the race that, again, our polling shows could be close. And if neither candidate gets 50%, it'll go to a runoff in December. And it could be the only national race on the ballot in December, which would bring even more attention on this campaign.
If it's possible, even more attention. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Tia Mitchell. Thank you. Former President Trump is sitting on top of a massive cash haul, the result of years of fundraising, and now members of his own party are asking him to put his money where his endorsements are. How likely is that to happen? And where Mr. Trump has put some of that cash, you are streaming CBS News.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange?
Yes.
You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
We are so excited, we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Mayor Savino.
Ms. Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know.
It's all right.
One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. Here is a look at some of our top stories. The chair of the House committee investigating January 6 says the panel is aiming to resume public hearings on September 28th. Representative Benny Thompson says the committee will produce an interim report 2 weeks after this proposed hearing and will finalize that report by the end of the year. Plus, top negotiators are here in Washington, D.C., trying to avert a strike of rail workers. Industry groups are warning of significant disruptions, which they say could result in higher prices and aggravate supply chain disruptions. Amtrak has already canceled long-distance trains starting tomorrow as a precaution. And thousands of mourners are gathered around Westminster Hall, where Queen Elizabeth II is lying in state. The public viewing will be open round the clock until her funeral Monday morning. Danya Backus has more from London.
Queen Elizabeth II passed under the Great Arch of Buckingham Palace for the last time, a horse-drawn carriage bearing her coffin in a solemn procession. The coffin was topped with foliage from the royal residences, including lavender and pine, and the imperial crown encrusted with thousands of diamonds. Mourners, young and old, many emotional, lined the route to witness the centuries-old tradition and say goodbye to Britain's longest-serving monarch.
Been a rock that's always been there. You know, politicians change, wars have happened, but the Queen has always been there.
As the coffin arrived at Westminster Hall, Queen Consort Camilla was at the King's side, and his sons were joined by their wives Kate and Meghan, the family united in grief.
With thy servant, Queen Elizabeth, and all the faithful departed.
Then the doors to the 900-year-old hall opened to the public, many bowing their heads to the Queen. The Queen will lie in state here at Westminster Hall for 4 days. The line extends for miles. As many as 1 million people are expected to visit. Many were in line overnight for the opportunity and say it was worth the wait.
She was a beautiful inspiration and such a moving energy in there.
It was very hard. Just seeing a coffin and not a queen, not our queen.
It's closure. Our queen has been laid to rest. She's at peace.
As world leaders make their way to London for Monday's funeral, mourners will visit around the clock. Danya Backus, CBS News, London.
Politico is reporting that former President Trump is under pressure from some Republicans to help fund GOP candidates in the midterms. Politico describes how Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and some of his allies are indirectly urging Trump to pony up some of the, get this, $99 million he has amassed in his own political campaign coffers to help Republicans and, in so doing, try to flip the Senate. All this comes ahead of midterm elections in which some of Trump's own endorsed candidates appear to be lagging in the polls and are definitely trailing their Democratic opponents in fundraising. Joining me now is one of the authors of that article, Politico national political correspondent Meredith McGraw. Meredith, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. One thing I want to clear up right from the start before we get into this money conversation, because money is different in politics. Are we talking about hard money from President Trump or independent expenditure money that is not directly coordinated with campaigns but can amplify a candidate's message?
Senator McConnell is urging these Trump-backed candidates and their PACs to donate or to have funds that are transferred from Save America to their own political PACs. And it comes as there's just a lot of frustration over the lack of spending that the former president has done in a lot of these races. While he's held rallies, he's done tele-rallies, he's held fundraisers where he's made appearances, he hasn't directly given or written checks to some of these candidates to help with some of the ad spending that they really need coming into the home stretch, especially as these advertisements really get more and more costly as we get closer to November.
And Meredith, I'm sure this is a rich experience for you as it is for me, understanding. And there's only one way to describe it, the ongoing public feud between Mitch McConnell and the former president, not just over tactics, but methodologies and approaches to obtaining and keeping power in Washington. How is this all playing out? And in the Trump world, do these entreaties, even if indirect from Mitch McConnell, elicit some kind of maybe behind-the-scenes chuckling or derision?
Well, it really does seem like there's a bit of a premature circular firing squad going on here between McConnell, Senator Rick Scott with the National Senatorial Republican Committee and with Donald Trump. And, we don't know how these races are going to play out come November, if Republicans will, in fact, pick up a seat in the Senate. But there is concern about some of these races in Arizona, in Ohio and Pennsylvania, where things are quite close. And there could be a case where Republicans don't eke it out. And what we've seen is really just a remarkable amount of public finger pointing. It hasn't been exactly behind the scenes over things like candidate quality or who's spending money or, Trump's involvement in certain races.
So Trump's Save America PAC has raised, according to the estimates and according to the filings, not the estimates, but the filings, $103 million and spent about $36 million. Where's that gone?
Well, he has spent money on some primary races. A lot of money was spent trying to get Governor Kemp out of the primary in Georgia, and Trump failed at that. And a lot of money was spent trying to oust Congresswoman Liz Cheney, which he was successful with in Wyoming. And he has spent money on some things related to, lawyers or different expenditures related to the Republican Party. But, overall, Trump has really sat on this amount of money. And people close to him say he's not obligated to be shelling out more money. Hasn't he already done enough? He's endorsed candidates. He is holding rallies. He's doing one in Pennsylvania this weekend and another one in North Carolina. Overall, he really is sitting on a giant mountain of cash. And should he announce a run for president, his hands will be kind of tied in how he'll be able to spend some of that money as well. And there's a possibility that, some of that money could go towards perhaps paying for his legal bills as he's facing so many legal battles this summer. And the RNC has said that they will not be helping him out in this case.
And Meredith, as you did the reporting for this, it would seem former President Trump, having endorsed some of these candidates who are in these difficulties, either via polling or fundraising, he'd want to get behind them so he could prove the concept. The endorsement is not just valuable in a primary, but in a general, and I'll put some money behind it to prove it.
Yeah, you would think that. And that's what I think Senator McConnell is hoping that the message will be. And for, a lot of Republicans, that Trump will see this as a good thing for his brand. If he spends money on these candidates and he puts them over the finish line, it's only a net positive for him, especially as he's poised to make an announcement for a run in 2024. But the former president also has a longstanding reputation for being a bit of a penny pincher, for being a little bit stingy, maybe with how or careful, maybe, or cautious with how he spends his money. And so, just by who he is, he's not exactly the most eager to be cutting checks left and right here.
Politico's Meredith McGraw, thanks so very much.
Thanks for having me.
A looming strike could put renewed stress on supply lines and impact the U.S. economy. What else is at stake if rail workers strike and why it's already disrupting commuter trains? You are streaming Red and Blue.
original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange?
Yes.
You do? Here. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
We are so excited, we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Mayor Savino. Miss Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know.
It's all right.
One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
CBS Mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
In Detroit today, President Biden toured the North American International Auto Show, highlighting his administration's push for electrical vehicle manufacturing. Deborah Alfarone has more from Washington.
President Biden is revving up the push for his administration's accomplishments at the North American International Auto Show in Battleground, Michigan.
Jump in, give you a ride to Washington.
The president announced the approval of $900 million to build more electric vehicle, or EV, chargers, spanning 53,000 miles of the national highway system. That's just part of an overall budget set aside for 500,000 chargers across the country by the end of the decade.
Now we're choosing to build a better America. An America that's confronting the climate crisis with America's workers leading the way.
The president has made promoting electric vehicles a key part of his climate goals. But back here in Washington, House Republicans are bashing his administration's energy policies.
You're not plugging your car into a tree. You need some stable energy sources, and a lot of that would be fossil fuels, but they're against fossil fuels.
In a bid to retake control of Congress in November's midterms, Republicans are also hitting the president on crime, the economy, and high inflation. The latest CBS News Battleground tracker shows the GOP with an advantage to win the House, though the Senate battle appears to be deadlocked.
The American people cannot afford another year of failed Democrat one-party rule in Washington.
President Biden indicated this week that he believes his party can keep control of the House. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
The White House is stepping up efforts to help with negotiations between railroad workers and their unions. Both parties are hoping to reach an agreement by Friday, that to avoid a national strike and subsequent supply chain issues. Skylar Henry has more.
Mr.
Mr. President, can you come talk to us about the railroad negotiations?
No. President Biden may not have wanted to talk about it, but he says his administration is working to avert a strike that would shut down the nation's railroads. Negotiators are working to reach a new deal by Friday.
We have made crystal clear to the interested parties the harm that American families, businesses, and farmers and communities would experience if they were not to reach a resolution.
Labor Secretary Martin Walsh is meeting with railroad executives and union leaders in D.C. this morning. The two sides are still at odds over sick time and attendance policies. 30% of all U.S. freight shipments could be impacted if there is a strike, putting further strain on the overwhelmed supply chain at a time when Americans are already dealing with inflation.
There's just no question that it would be extremely devastating, and its impacts would compound very rapidly over a couple of days.
A federal law on the books actually allows Congress to step in and prevent railway workers from striking. But Democratic leaders say they aren't going to go down that road.
Let me tell you, first and foremost, I don't believe that's a good idea. I believe that the unions, as well as the railroads, should step up to the plate and get this done quickly.
Senator Jerry Moran, who said he's worried about farmers being able to ship their crops, says Congress should act.
I will utilize my opportunities as a member of the Senate, as a member of Congress, for congressional intervention and work to shield the impact of a rail shutdown across the nation.
The Biden administration says it's working on contingency plans, including adding more truckers to the struggling trucking industry to keep goods moving. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
We will be right back. You are streaming Red and Blue on CBS News.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
We are so excited we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Ms. Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know. It's all right. One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
The head of the Senate Leadership Fund, that's a super PAC aligned with Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, says Nevada and New Hampshire are two states to watch when it comes to flipping democratically held seats. I spoke with Stephen Law about the upcoming races in this week's episode of The Takeout. Here's a part of that conversation.
It's interesting. Whenever you talk to local politicians and you talk to them about somebody from the other party, they always say, oh, nobody likes that person. And you always take it with a grain of salt because, obviously they're from the other party. In New Hampshire, people really just kind of don't like Maggie Hassan.
The incumbent senator, yes.
Yeah,
and the polling data supports that. It shows
exactly, right. And I think
underwater.
Right, underwater. And I think in some ways
approval, disapproval, out of whack.
Yes, right, exactly that. And just a lack of real attachment to the electorate. Now, she's only been there one term, but I think she suffers from comparison to Jean Shaheen, who is widely beloved in the state. We found that when we thought about taking her out this last time. Just a tougher target. But people don't love Maggie Hassan, and it stayed to this point. We thought that because of abortion politics, New Hampshire is a pretty pro-choice state. We thought that would change the dynamic. Actually, it's soured for her, and so we think we've got a very weak incumbent. The question is whether our nominee can take the fight.
You can watch more of my chat with Stephen Law on The Takeout. New episodes of my show come out every Friday wherever you get your podcast. And here's the good news. It also streams Friday at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News. Well, that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of this fine program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange?
Yes.
You do? Here. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
We are so excited, we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore. Hi, guys.
Mayor Savino.
Miss Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
It's the Fonz. Wow.
His name is Henry.
I know.
It's all right. One question. How often do you consume cannabis?
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
Here we are, your favorite morning people.
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
The people of Great Britain say farewell to their Queen as the world pays respect to a celebrated leader. From Queen Elizabeth's remarkable reign to the future of the monarchy, CBS News special coverage streaming now.
Hello, I'm John Dickerson. Welcome to CBS News Prime Time. Here's a look at our top stories. Rising costs. Our Nancy Cordes talks to Treasury Secretary